My name is Krista, and at 32 years old, I never expected to be homeless on Christmas night. After serving 10 years in the Army and sending almost every paycheck home, I thought my family would welcome me with open arms when I returned injured. My name is Krista. Instead, my mother looked me in the eyes over Christmas dinner and spoke words that cut deeper than any combat wound. "You're a burden. Get out of this house." With nowhere else to go, I took a late-night bus to my grandmother's farm, not knowing that when she opened her door, the 5 words she spoke would shatter what little was left of my heart. As I share my journey from rejection to redemption, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and subscribe if stories of resilience speak to your heart. Growing up with Diane as a mother was like walking on eggshells scattered across a minefield. From my earliest memories, her love always came with conditions. "I bought you new shoes, so you better get straight A's this semester. Or after all I do for you, the least you could do is clean the entire house." Nothing was ever freely given. Everything was a transaction. My father left when I was 5. I have vague memories of a tall man with a kind smile who would read me bedtime stories, but those memories faded with time. After he was gone, Mom would often remind me how much I looked like him, and not in a good way. "You have his stubborn chin," she would say with disdain, "always thinking you know better than everyone else." The only consistent love in my childhood came from my grandmother Eleanor, my mother's mother. Grandma's farm was my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe freely and just be a kid. During summer breaks, I would spend weeks at her sprawling property in rural Pennsylvania, helping with the chickens, learning to bake apple pies, and sitting on the porch swing as she told me stories about her own childhood. "You know, Krista," she would say as we shelled peas together, "you have a spirit that cannot be broken. Remember that when the world feels heavy." I clung to those words through middle school and high school. As my mother's behavior became increasingly erratic, some days she would be almost loving, bringing home my favorite ice cream or asking about my day. Those glimpses of maternal warmth were enough to keep me hoping that someday she would change, that someday I would be enough for her to love unconditionally. My siblings learned to play her game better than I ever could. Tyler, 2 years younger than me, became the perfect chameleon, adjusting his personality to whatever would please Mom in the moment. Vanessa, the youngest by 4 years, mastered the art of flattery from an early age. "Mom, you look like you could be my sister," she would say, and Diane would beam with pride. Meanwhile, I remained the stubborn one, the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions and had too many needs. By 18, I knew I needed to escape. The military seemed like the perfect solution, a way out of the house, a chance to serve a purpose greater than myself, and, surprisingly, a way to finally earn my mother's approval. The day I told her I had enlisted, I saw something in her eyes I had rarely seen before: respect. "The military will be good for you," she said. "Teach you some discipline." What she didn't say, but what became clear in the following months, was that my enlistment also presented a financial opportunity. As I prepared to leave for basic training, she casually mentioned how tight money had been, how hard it was raising 3 children on her own, how the house needed a new roof. I made my first promise to send money home while still at the recruitment office. The recruiter had just finished explaining my salary structure when I mentally began allocating a portion for my mother and siblings. It seemed like the right thing to do. After all, family supports family, right? Basic training was brutal, but clarifying. For the first time in my life, the rules made sense. Work hard, follow orders, support your team, and you'll succeed. The arbitrary nature of my mother's approval was replaced by the straightforward expectations of my drill sergeants. I thrived in that environment, graduating at the top of my class. During my first deployment, I set up an automatic transfer to send $500 home each month. It was a significant portion of my salary, but I lived on base with most expenses covered. The few times I called home, my mother actually sounded happy to hear from me. "Everyone at church is so proud," she told me once. I show them your photos in uniform, my daughter serving her country. Those words sustained me through long nights in foreign lands, through the fear and the loneliness. My mother was proud of me. Finally, I had done something right. As the years passed, her financial requests increased. The roof turned into a bathroom. Then Vanessa needed a car for college. Then Tyler lost his job and moved back home. Each time I increased the amount I sent, often taking extra shifts or dangerous assignments that came with hazard pay. When I did get leave to visit home, the warmth I heard in our phone calls rarely materialized in person. Mom would have a list of home repairs waiting for me or social obligations that kept her busy during my brief stays. Still, there were moments: a birthday cake with my favorite frosting, a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about military achievements that might have included my unit, a quick hug. As I headed back to the airport, to those moments like precious gems, evidence that beneath it all, my mother did love me. I just needed to try harder, give more, be better. Then she would finally show me the unconditional love I craved. My grandmother saw through it all. During my visits to her farm, which I always prioritized despite my mother's complaints, Eleanor would gently try to open my eyes. "Krista, love should not be this hard," she would say as we walked through her orchard. "You cannot buy someone affection. And if you could, it would not be worth having." But I wasn't ready to hear her wisdom. The pattern was set. I would serve. I would send money. And someday it would be enough. Someday I would come home to the loving family I had always wanted. That dream kept me going through 10 years of service, through 3 deployments, through watching friends fall in combat and attending their funerals. Through it all, I held on to the belief that I was not just serving my country but also securing my place in my family's heart. How wrong I was. My final deployment was supposed to be a routine peacekeeping mission. Our unit had been sent to provide security for a humanitarian aid distribution in a region that had seen conflict but was considered relatively stable. I had been on dozens of similar missions before and had developed a sixth sense for trouble. That day, everything felt normal as we escorted the aid trucks into the small village. I remember joking with Santos, one of the newer members of our unit, as we scanned the crowds. "Keep your eyes open, but your finger off the trigger," I told him. "These are mostly just families trying to get food." The explosion came without warning. Later, they would tell me it was an I'd buried in the road weeks earlier, likely forgotten until our convoy triggered it. I remember a flash of light, a deafening sound, and then the sensation of flying through the air. When I landed, I couldn't feel my legs, and the screaming I heard seemed distant, as if coming from another world. I learned much later that Santos had been killed instantly. 3 other members of my unit suffered serious injuries. As for me, the explosion had sent shrapnel tearing through my right leg and lower back, damaging nerves and shattering my femur. When I woke up in the field hospital, the first thing the doctor told me was that I was lucky to be alive. The second thing he said was that my military career was over. The next 3 months were a blur of surgeries, pain medications, and physical therapy. I had to learn to walk again with the help of a cane and leg brace. The nerve damage meant constant pain that even the strongest medications could only dull. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of losing Santos, of having my career abruptly ended, of facing a future I had never planned for. During those months of recovery, my mother called more frequently than she ever had before. Her voice took on a nurturing tone I barely recognized. "We're getting your old room ready," she said in one call. "Tyler moved out again, so you'll have the whole space to yourself." In another, she mentioned, "The church group is organizing meals. Everyone wants to help our wounded warrior." The attention was disorienting, but welcome. Perhaps this was the silver lining to my injury, finally proving to my mother that I deserved her care. I began to envision a homecoming filled with the love and support I had always craved. In my hospital bed, I daydreamed about family dinners where I would be the guest of honor, about my mother tenderly helping me with my physical therapy exercises, about finally being part of a family unit that functioned with love rather than obligation. As my discharge date approached, I made plans to return home just before Christmas. "It will be perfect," my mother said when I called to confirm the dates. "The whole family will be together for the holidays, a real celebration." The journey home was arduous. The military had arranged for medical transport to the major airport, but from there, I was on my own. Each step with my cane sent shooting pain through my leg, and navigating the crowded holiday terminals was exhausting. Still, I pushed through, fueled by the anticipation of the welcome that awaited me. As the plane began its descent into Pittsburgh International Airport, I peered out the window at the snow-covered landscape. After a decade of desert deployments and foreign bases, the sight of an American winter filled me with a sense of belonging. I was coming home not just to a country but to a family. Or so I thought. The first hint that things might not match my expectations came when I turned on my phone after landing. I'd installed Desert Setse. No messages asking about my flight status. No missed calls checking if I needed anything. I brushed aside the disappointment and called my mother. "I've landed," I said when she answered. "Oh, that's today." Her voice held none of the excitement I had expected. "Well, we're all busy with Christmas preparations. Can you get a cab?" The cab ride from the airport to our suburban neighborhood cost nearly $80, a significant expense given my uncertain financial future. As we pulled up to the two-story house where I had grown up, I noticed the elaborate Christmas decorations adorning the front yard, light-up reindeer, inflatable Santa Clauses, and strings of multicolored lights outlining every window. My mother had always loved making a display for the neighbors to admire. I paid the driver and awkwardly maneuvered my duffel bag while balancing on my cane. No one came out to help as I made my slow way up the icy walkway. By the time I reached the front door, sweat had soaked through my shirt despite the December chill, and the pain in my leg had intensified to a burning throb. I raised my hand to knock but hesitated. This was my childhood home. Should I just walk in? Before I could decide, the door swung open, and there stood my mother, looking annoyed. "Were you just going to stand there all day? You're letting all the heat out." And just like that, I knew nothing had changed. If anything, it had gotten worse. The house smelled like pine needles and cinnamon, a combination that had always signified Christmas throughout my childhood. A massive tree dominated the living room, decorated with the collection of ornaments my mother had carefully curated over decades. Some were family heirlooms passed down from her own mother. A massive tree, together with others were expensive collectibles she purchased each year to keep up with the latest holiday trends. "You can put your things in your old room," she said, already turning away. We converted it to a home office, but Tyler set up an Arnachen air mattress for you. I stood in the entryway, leaning heavily on my cane, trying to reconcile this cold reception with the nurturing voice I had heard on the phone during my hospital stay. Before I could respond, my sister Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. "Krista, you made it." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine as she approached for a hug, then hesitated, eyeing my cane. "Can I hug you? I don't want to hurt you." "A hug would be nice," I said, realizing how long it had been since anyone had offered me physical affection. The embrace was brief but warm, a small comfort in the increasingly chilly atmosphere of my homecoming. "Vanessa, the pie needs checking," my mother called from the kitchen. My sister gave me an apologetic smile and hurried away. Alone again, I made my painful way up the stairs to what had once been my bedroom. True to my mother's word, it had been converted into a home office with a desk, computer, and filing cabinets. An air mattress had been half inflated in the corner, a thin blanket and flat pillow tossed on top. There was no evidence that I had ever lived in this space. No photographs, no remnants of the pale blue paint I had chosen as a teenager. No marks on the doorframe tracking my childhood growth. I set down my bag and lowered myself carefully onto the air mattress, which sank nearly to the floor under my weight. 10 years of service, thousands of dollars sent home, and this was my welcome. I allowed myself a moment of self-pity before straightening my spine. Maybe they just needed time to adjust to my presence. Maybe once the initial awkwardness passed, the warmth would come. By evening, the house had filled with extended family, my Aunt Susan and her husband Frank, my cousins Jennifer and Peter with their spouses, and my brother Tyler, who arrived last with a bottle of expensive wine and no acknowledgement of my presence. The gathering was loud and festive, with everyone talking over each other about jobs and vacations. And the children who had been left with babysitters for the adults, only celebration. I sat quietly in a corner of the living room, the constant pain making it difficult to engage in the rapid-fire conversations happening around me. Occasionally, someone would glance my way with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, but few made the effort to speak directly to me. It was as if my injury had rendered me invisible. Or perhaps worse, had turned me into a reminder of unpleasant realities that had no place at a Christmas gathering. Aunt Susan finally approached, wine glass in hand. "So, you got hurt over there, huh?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward my leg. "Yes, an explosion." "Shrapnel damage and nerve injury," I explained, grateful for the acknowledgement despite her clear discomfort. "Well, at least you're home now," she said brightly. "And the military takes care of their own, right? I'm sure they set you up with good benefits." Before I could explain the complicated reality of veteran benefits and the battles that often accompanied them, my mother called everyone to the dining room for dinner. The table was a masterpiece of holiday perfection. Fine china that only appeared on special occasions, crystal glasses that had belonged to my grandmother, and an elaborate centerpiece of poinsettias and glittering ornaments. The food matched the presentation: a golden turkey, cranberry sauce molded into perfect circles, and "Krista, you can sit at the end next to the wall," my mother instructed, pointing to a chair that had been awkwardly wedged into a space clearly not intended for a table setting. "That way your equipment won't be in the way." By equipment, she meant my cane, which I needed to keep close for stability. I made my way to the assigned seat, aware of the stairs following my labored movements. The chair was pushed so close to the wall that I had to sit sideways, my injured leg extending into what little space remained. The dinner began with a prayer led by Uncle Frank, thanking God for family, health, and prosperity. No mention was made of military service or sacrifice. As dishes were passed around, the table conversations resumed, focusing on neighborhood gossip and workplace achievements. "Jennifer just got promoted to senior manager," Aunt Susan announced proudly. "Youngest in company history." "And Peter closed that big account he was telling us about at Thanksgiving," Uncle Frank added. "Commission was enough to put a down payment on a boat." My mother beamed at my cousins. "Always knew you two would do well for yourselves. Got the family ambition." The implication hung in the third. "Air unlike me," who had wasted 10 years in the military. I swallowed my hurt along with a bite of dry turkey and tried to join the conversation. "The unit I served with did some amazing work rebuilding schools in Krista. Could you pass the gravy?" My brother interrupted, not bothering to make eye contact. The pattern continued throughout the meal. Each time I tried to speak about my experiences, or even respond to a direct question, someone would talk over me or change the subject. My mother, at the head of the table, orchestrated this subtle exclusion with the skill of a conductor, directing attention away from me with pointed questions to others. The breaking point came during dessert. My mother brought out her special Christmas pudding, served on the antique dessert plates that had belonged to her grandmother. As she handed me my portion, her expression made it clear she expected me to recognize the honor she was bestowing by allowing me to use the precious family heirloom. I accepted the plate with a murmured thanks, but as I shifted in my uncomfortable chair, my injured leg seized with a spasm of pain. My hand jerked, and the plate slipped from my fingers, crashing to the hardwood floor where it shattered into dozens of pieces. The silence that followed was absolute. "I'm so sorry," I began, already reaching for my cane to help me get down and clean up the mess. My mother's face had transformed into a mask of cold fury. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Her voice was quiet but vibrating with rage. "But that plate survived 2 world wars, and you couldn't manage to hold on to it for 5 minutes." "It was an accident," I said, my voice small. "My leg, your pain, your service." She spat the words like they were poison. "That's all we've heard about for months. Do you think you're the only person with problems? While you were playing soldier, I was here dealing with real life, real bills, real responsibilities." I stared at her in shock. "Playing soldier? Mom, I nearly died. And I sent you thousands of dollars over the years. Money that barely covered what it cost to maintain this house, to keep up appearances in this neighborhood. She cut me off. And now you come back expecting us to wait on you hand and foot, to rearrange our lives around your disability. The room was frozen, everyone watching the confrontation with a mixture of discomfort and morbid fascination. I never expected that, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I just thought what? That we'd be your nursemaids, that we'd convert the house into a hospital ward. My mother now stood, looking down at me with contempt. Look at you. You can barely feed yourself. You're a burden, Krista. A burden I never asked for. The words hit me like physical blows. I had spent 10 years convincing myself that my sacrifices were building a foundation of love and respect. In one moment, that foundation crumbled to dust. If that's how you feel, I said, struggling to my feet, then I'll go. Best idea you've had since you got here, my mother replied coldly. Get out of this house. Go find somewhere your brokenness won't ruin everyone else's holiday. No one spoke up. Not Tyler, not Vanessa, not any of the relatives who had benefited from the money I had faithfully sent home. They sat in uncomfortable silence, eyes averted, as I gathered my dignity along with my cane and limped toward the stairs to collect my few belongings. As I painfully made my way up the steps, I heard the conversation resume behind me, as if a brief unpleasantness had been dealt with and the celebration could continue uninterrupted. By the time I came back downstairs with my duffel bag, the broken plate had been swept away and a fresh dessert had been served. And guests? No one looked up as I let myself out the front door and into the cold Christmas night. The winter air hit my face like a slap, shocking me out of the numb disbelief that had carried me out of the house. Reality crashed in as I stood on the front porch, duffel bag at my feet, cane clutched in my trembling hand. It was past 9 at night on Christmas Day. I was injured and alone, and I had nowhere to go. For a moment, I considered knocking on the door and apologizing, swallowing my pride along with the injustice of it all. But even as the thought formed, I heard laughter from inside, the celebration continuing without a hitch in my absence. The message was clear. I was not missed. With painful slowness, I made my way down the icy walkway to the street. The nearest hotel was miles away, an impossible journey on foot in my condition. I pulled out my phone, checking my bank balance before calling a cab. The numbers on the screen made my stomach clench. After paying for the cab from the airport, and with no final paycheck yet processed from my medical discharge, I had less than $200 to my name. As I stood there, a car slowed in front of the house. The window rolled down, revealing an elderly man peering out at me with concern. "You all right there, miss?" "Need some help with your bag." Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined. The Army had taught me self-reliance and caution around strangers, but these were not normal circumstances. "Actually," I said, my voice catching, "I could use a ride to the bus station, if it's not too much trouble." The man, who introduced himself as George, insisted it was no trouble at all. "My wife passed last year," he explained as he carefully loaded my bag into his trunk. "Driving around on Christmas night keeps me from sitting alone with the memories." As we drove through the decorated neighborhoods, George shared stories about his 50-year marriage and asked gentle questions about my service. Unlike my family, he listened when I spoke, expressing genuine gratitude for my sacrifice. By the time we reached the bus station, I felt something I hadn't experienced since landing on American soil. Respected. "Where are you headed?" George asked as he helped me out of the car. I hesitated before answering. "My grandmother's farm. It's about 2 hours from here." "Well, I hope your welcome there is warmer than whatever sent you out on Christmas night," he said, genuine concern in his eyes. He refused my offer of money for the ride, instead pressing $20 into my hand for the bus ticket. "Merry Christmas, soldier." I watched him drive away, a knot tightening in my throat. A stranger had shown me more kindness in 20 minutes than my family had in my entire homecoming. Inside the station, I discovered that the last bus heading toward my grandmother's farm would leave in 15 minutes. It wouldn't take me all the way there, only to the small town about 5 miles from her property. But it was the best option I had. I purchased the ticket using George's $20 and some of my dwindling funds. The bus was nearly empty, just a handful of other travelers with their own stories of why they were journeying on Christmas night. I found a seat near the back where I could stretch my injured leg into the aisle and settled in for the ride, my cane propped beside me like a silent companion. As the bus pulled away from the station, the events of the day replayed in my mind: the cold reception, the converted bedroom, the uncomfortable dinner, the shattered plate, my mother's cruel words. "You're a burden." After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, this was what waited for me at home. The contrast with my military experience couldn't have been more stark. In the Army, I had found the family I always craved. My unit members had become brothers and sisters who would literally take a bullet for one another. We shared food, stories, fears, and dreams. When one of us succeeded, we all celebrated. When one of us struggled, we all gave support. I thought about Santos, so young and eager to serve, now buried in Arlington. I thought about Captain Rodriguez, who had visited me every day in the hospital until her own deployment. I thought about Specialist Wilson, who had lost both legs in a previous explosion and had video called me from his prosthetic fitting to show me that life continued after injury. They were my real family, and now I was separated from them by distance and circumstance, cast out by the biological family that had never truly accepted. The landscape outside the window shifted as we left the suburbs behind, first giving way to highway emptiness, then to the rolling farmlands of western Pennsylvania. Even in the darkness, illuminated only by the occasional passing car or farmhouse light, I recognized this terrain. It was the backdrop of my happiest childhood memories, all centered around visits to my grandmother's farm. I realized I hadn't called ahead to tell her I was coming. It was now past 10:30, likely well after she would have gone to bed. I pulled out my phone, but the battery was nearly dead, and I had left my charger plugged in beside the air mattress in my hurry to leave. I managed to dial her number before the phone died completely, but the call went straight to voicemail. Anxiety gnawed at me as the miles passed. What if she wasn't home? What if she was traveling for the holidays? What if, like my mother, she saw me as nothing but a burden? No, I couldn't believe that. Eleanor had always been my safe harbor, the one person who loved me unconditionally. She would welcome me. She had to. The bus arrived at the small town station just before midnight. As the driver announced our location, I gathered my belongings and made my slow way to the front. "Merry Christmas," the driver said as I carefully navigated the steps down to the sidewalk. "You got someone meeting you?" "No," I admitted. "Oh. I need to get to a farm about 5 miles north of here." He frowned. "Not much in the way of taxis in this town, especially this time of night. And in your condition," I nodded, already aware of the problem. 5 miles might as well have been 50, given my injury and the hour. "Wait here," the driver said before walking across the street to a small convenience store, the only business still open this late on Christmas. He returned minutes later with an older man in tow. "This is Harold," the driver explained. "Owns the store. He says he's heading that direction after he closes up in about 15 minutes. He can give you a ride if you're willing to wait." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you," I said to both men, fighting back tears. "I can wait." Harold proved to be another unexpected angel on this strangest of Christmas nights. After closing his store, he helped me into his pickup truck and listened attentively as I gave directions to my grandmother's farm. Like George, he asked about my service with genuine interest, sharing that his own son was currently deployed with the Navy. "Must be hard coming home to a country that doesn't understand what you've been through," he observed as we turned onto the rural route leading to my grandmother's property. "Harder coming home to a family that doesn't want to understand," I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Harold just nodded, his silence carrying the weight of wisdom. The truck's headlights illuminated the familiar sign at the entrance to my grandmother's long driveway, Eleanor's Orchard and Farm. Below it, the smaller sign that had hung there since my childhood, "All are welcome here." I prayed that included me. The farmhouse stood silhouetted against the night sky, a two-story structure that had weathered nearly a century of seasons. A single light glowed from the kitchen window, a beacon of hope that propelled me forward, despite my exhaustion and pain. "Want me to wait until you're inside?" Harold asked as he helped me out of the truck. "No, thank you. You've done more than enough," I assured him, though uncertainty churned in my stomach. "My grandmother and I are close. She'll be glad to see me." With a final wave, Harold drove away, his taillights disappearing down the dark country road. I stood alone at the end of the walkway, gathering my courage before beginning the slow journey to the front porch. Each step with my cane on the gravel path sent jolts of pain through my damaged nerves, but I pressed on, focused on the light from the window. The 3 steps up to the porch might as well have been a mountain. By the time I reached the front door, sweat had soaked through my shirt despite the December chill, and my breathing came in short, pained gasps. I leaned heavily against the doorframe, trying to compose myself before knocking. What would I say? How would I explain showing up unannounced near midnight on Christmas? The truth seemed too painful to articulate, even to the one person who had always accepted me unconditionally. Before I could decide, my hand rose almost of its own accord and knocked on the weathered wooden door. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. Long moments passed. I knocked again, louder this time, fear rising, that the light I had seen was simply left on by accident, that the house was empty, that this final hope would prove as hollow as all the others. Then came the sound of movement inside, a chair scraping, footsteps approaching. The porch light flickered on, momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, the door had opened to reveal my grandmother. Eleanor looked older than I remembered. Her once auburn hair was now completely silver, with new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. She wore a faded robe over flannel pajamas, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her expression, as she took in my appearance, the cane, the duffel bag, the obvious distress shifted from surprise to something I couldn't read. "Grandma," I began, my voice breaking. "I'm sorry to show up like this." She held up a hand, stopping my words. Her face hardened in a way I had never seen before. When she spoke, her voice was cold and distant. "Your mother called. Go away." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, nearly losing my balance, the last fragments of my heart shattering into dust. The one person I had counted on, the one relationship I had believed was genuine and unconditional, had just rejected me as thoroughly as my mother had. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process this final betrayal. Tears streamed down my face as I stood swaying on her porch, utterly broken, and then, in an instant, everything changed. Eleanor's hard expression melted away, replaced by alarm and then fierce love. She lunged forward, grabbing my arms before I could collapse. "Krista, oh my God, I'm sorry. I had to be sure." Her words tumbled out, urgent and trembling. "Your mother called earlier, said you'd had some kind of breakdown, that you were violent, stealing from her." I knew it was lies, but I needed to see for myself. The relief that crashed over me was so intense my legs gave out completely. Eleanor, far stronger than her frail frame suggested, caught me and guided me inside, kicking the door shut behind us. "What did she do to you?" "To you?" she demanded, lowering me onto the worn sofa that had been in her living room since my childhood. Her eyes, once so gentle, burned with righteous fury. Through tears and exhaustion, I told her everything. The converted bedroom, the cold indifference, the dinner table humiliation, and finally, my mother. Cruel dismissal. Eleanor listened in silence, her expression hardening with every detail. When I finished, her voice shook with barely contained rage. "That woman, my own daughter. I have never been so ashamed in all my life." She disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a glass of water and 2 small pills. "For the pain," she said softly, reading my body. "It's tension with a grandmother's intuition. The rest we'll handle tomorrow." As I swallowed, she took my hands firmly in hers. "Krista, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are not a mistake. You are a hero, not just for your service, but for your courage, your kindness, and your strength. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." Tears welled again. She said no one wanted me. The words cracked as they left my throat. She was wrong, Eleanor said fiercely, squeezing my hand. I want you. I have missed you every single day for 10 years. Having you here, this is the best Christmas gift I could ask for. Later, she led me to the guest room, a space lovingly preserved as if waiting for me all this time. Photographs of me in uniform lined the dresser. A handmade quilt in my favorite colors covered the bed. Even the books I had loved as a teenager still sat neatly on the shelf. You kept all this for me, I whispered, overwhelmed. Of course, she said simply. This has always been your home, too. She helped me into bed, careful of my injured leg, and hummed the same lullaby she used to sing when I was a child. The sound wrapped around me like armor, softening the edges of pain and fear. Just before sleep claimed me, I felt her brush the hair from my forehead. Rest now, she whispered. You're safe. You're home. And for the first time since stepping off the plane onto American soil, I truly was. The next morning, winter sunlight filtered through the curtains. For a moment, I wondered if it had all been a dream. The soft quilt, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of belonging. Then the ache in my leg pulled me back to reality. I was still broken, still rejected by my mother, still unemployed and directionless. But I was not alone. A soft knock preceded my grandmother, said entrance. She carried a tray, breakfast, and a steaming mug of coffee. How are you feeling this morning? She asked gently, setting it down. Physically or emotionally? I tried to smile but knew it came out as more of a grimace. She sat carefully on the bed, eyes steady on mine. Both, she said, and I imagine both are pretty rough. But we're going to work on healing, both kinds, one day at a time. Eleanor's words were steady, like bedrock. Over breakfast, she encouraged me to speak openly, not just about the disaster of Christmas dinner, but about the years that had led me there. Unlike my family, who treated my service as a passing inconvenience, Eleanor leaned forward, listening with fierce attention. She asked thoughtful questions, winced at the dangers I described, and looked me in the eye with pride that no metal could match. When she cleared the dishes, she shook her head. Your mother has always been self-centered. Even as a child, she wanted the world to bend around her. I tried to teach her empathy. But some people simply can't see beyond themselves. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I kept thinking if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, dottered, maybe then she'd love me the way I needed. Eleanor's eyes softened, brimming with compassion. Krista, that was never going to happen. Not because you weren't worthy of her love, but because she isn't capable of giving it. In the days that followed, she helped me begin to unravel not just the sting of recent rejection, but a lifetime of conditional love that had quietly shaped my choices. She brought down boxes of letters I had written from overseas. Each envelope was carefully preserved, edges worn from use. I read every one at least a dozen times, she confessed, and I showed them to anyone who would stand still long enough to listen. My church group probably knew more about your deployments than your own unit did. Her words steadied me, even as new truths threatened to unmoor me. At her kitchen table one night, Eleanor spread out a stack of financial records she had been keeping. I was worried, she admitted. The money you sent home always seemed too much. I knew what your salary was. I even asked your mother once. She swore you were fine, that you had plenty left for yourself. The truth hit like shrapnel. Piece by piece, we realized that most of the money I had sent home hadn't gone toward the household expenses I believed I was covering. The roof I thought I'd replaced was the same sagging one I'd left years before. The college tuition I thought I'd funded had actually been covered by Vanessa's. Scholarships and loans, vacations, jewelry, appearances, those were my mother's priorities. She was using you, Eleanor said plainly, her jaw tight with regret, and I bear some blame for not stepping in sooner. You couldn't have known, I whispered, but the knowledge cut deep. My sacrifices, years of them, had been squandered. Another betrayal to carry. After the first week, Eleanor insisted I see her longtime physician, Dr. Martin. The kind, white-haired man listened more in one visit than military doctors had in months. After examining me, he shook his head. The surgeons did what they could, but your therapy plan is outdated, and these pain meds, too strong for long-term use, they'll dull you instead of help you heal. With his guidance, we built a new recovery plan. He referred me to a local physical therapist who specialized in nerve injuries and showed us safer methods of pain management, tools that didn't leave me foggy and dependent. For the first time, I glimpsed the possibility of true healing, not just survival. By January, heavy snow blanketed the farm, transforming it into a white wonderland. Beautiful, yes, but for me, every icy step was another battle, and yet, Eleanor's community closed the gap my family had left. Church friends dropped off casseroles, cleared paths through the snow, and offered rides to my appointments. Strangers, really. But they treated me with more dignity than my own blood ever had. For the first time in a long time, I began to believe in the possibility of belonging. Eleanor's neighbors became part of my healing too. Their teenage sons showed up after every snowstorm, shoveling paths so I could practice walking with my cane on steady ground. Most surprising of all was how many people already knew me. Strangers greeted me by name, telling stories of my service and my achievements, stories Eleanor had proudly shared for years. "You've been bragging about me," I teased one evening as we sat by the fireplace, the crackling logs warming the farmhouse. "Of course I have," she replied without hesitation. "I've always been tremendously proud of you." As winter yielded to early spring, I began to find new purpose on the farm. I couldn't lift heavy equipment or climb ladders to prune trees, but there was plenty I could do. I updated Eleanor's outdated accounting system, reorganized her farm records, and handled lighter chores with the animals. Each task, small as it seemed, gave me a sense of contribution. The physical work, paired with my therapy, slowly strengthened me. The pain never vanished, but it loosened its grip, and I learned how to manage flare-ups without drowning in medication. More important than my body's recovery was the shift in my heart. Under Eleanor's steady guidance, I began to see clearly the patterns that had ruled my life. The endless pursuit of approval, the desperate need to earn love that was never freely given. Love that has to be earned isn't love at all, Eleanor told me as we pressed seeds into soil in her greenhouse. It's a transaction. And you deserve better than transactions. You deserve unconditional acceptance. Her words took root in me. By the time the orchard's first green shoots broke through the thawed earth, I realized something unthinkable only months before. I wanted to stay. Not as a guest, not on borrowed time, but permanently. When I told Eleanor, she studied me carefully. "Are you sure? This is a quiet life, very different from what you've known. And you're young, Krista. You still have so many possibilities ahead." "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. "For the first time, I'm choosing what brings me peace, not what might earn someone's approval." So we adapted the farm together. The ground floor study became my bedroom, sparing me the stairs on painful days. Handrails went up in key places. The barn was reorganized so I could help with chores without pushing my body beyond its limits. With every change, the farm became not just Eleanor's home, but ours. In late March, the phone rang. Vanessa. Her voice trembled with hesitation. "I've been wanting to call," she began. "What happened at Christmas was wrong. The way Mom treated you, the things she said. None of us should have stayed silent. But you did," I replied softly, not to wound her, but because it was true. "Yes," she admitted, "we did. I don't have an excuse, only an explanation. Mom has always controlled the narrative." Following her lead was easier than standing against her. It was a hard conversation, but a necessary one. Vanessa didn't beg forgiveness, which I respected. Some wounds were still raw, but she asked if we could try to rebuild, sister to sister, apart from. "I'd like that," I told her honestly, but slowly. Tyler was another story. In April, he called once, his tone curt and entitled, "Mom says you still have access to the family account. She needs you to transfer your disability back way when it comes through." The old Krista might have caved, might have seen this as one more chance to buy love. But the new Krista, strengthened by months of Eleanor's wisdom, recognized the manipulation. "No, Tyler," I said evenly. That's not going to happen. My disability pay is for me, to build a new life. His voice rose with indignation. After everything Mom has done for you, what exactly has she done for me, Tyler? I cut in quietly. I'm genuinely asking. The silence that followed was answer enough. With Eleanor. Encouragement. I took legal steps to protect myself. A veteran's advocate guided me through the benefits system, ensuring that neither my mother nor anyone else could touch my pension or disability pay. For the first time, I felt financially and emotionally untethered from her control. I closed the joint accounts, removed my mother as a beneficiary on my policies, and set firm boundaries around financial support. Whenever guilt crept in, Eleanor reminded me gently, "Your resources are limited. You need to secure your own future." By summer, as the farm's busiest season began, I had settled into my days revolved around physical therapy, farm tasks adapted to my abilities, and online courses I had enrolled in using my military education benefits. I was studying agricultural business management, blending my military leadership experience with my growing passion for farming. The transformation wasn't just in my routine. For the first time, I was making choices rooted in fulfillment, not in chasing someone else's approval. I learned to accept help without shame, to set boundaries without guilt, and, most importantly, to recognize my worth apart from what I could give others. You stand taller. Now, Eleanor observed one evening as we sat on the porch, watching fireflies rise over the fields. Not just physically, she added, and I knew exactly what she meant. Despite the limp that would never leave me, despite the cane that had become part of me, I carried myself with new confidence. The burden I had shed wasn't my injury, it was the crushing weight of needing validation from someone who could never give it. I feel taller, I said softly. Lighter, too. Eleanor smiled and squeezed my hand. That's what happens when you stop carrying other people's expectations and start honoring your own truth. 1 year after that fateful Christmas night, the farm had changed almost as much as I had. What had once been Eleanor's retirement project had grown into a thriving family business shaped by both her vision and my contributions. The orchard now had wider paths, not only to accommodate my mobility but also to make it more accessible for elderly visitors and families with strollers. We had transformed one of the outbuildings into a small farm store where we sold apple products, honey from our new beehives, and seasonal vegetables. My physical recovery had plateaued, just as Dr. Martin had warned. The nerve damage was permanent, leaving me with chronic pain and limited use of my right leg. The cane remained constant, and some days still required the wheelchair we kept for emergencies. But I had learned to adapt, to pace myself, and, most importantly, to stop seeing these limitations as failures. Even more significant than my physical adjustment was my growth in purpose. With my military education benefits, I completed courses in sustainable agriculture, business management, and web design. The farm now had its own website and social media presence, expanding our reach beyond the local community. I also found meaning in veterans support work, creating a small program that welcomed former service members for day visits. Many, like me, struggled to transition into civilian life. On the farm, they found peace in the steady rhythm of work and comfort in our accepting community. Eleanor, now in her late 70s, embraced every change with joy. "The farm has never been so alive," she often said, watching visitors wander the orchards or children play with the animals. My relationship with Vanessa, too, had cautiously improved. She had visited twice, awkward at first, but slowly warming to the life I had built. She brought her children, my niece and nephew, who loved gathering eggs from the henhouse and feeding the goats we had added to the farm. Tyler, however, remained distant, still firmly bound to my mother, Sid influence. I had made peace with that distance, accepting that some relationships cannot be forced into health. As for my mother, I had neither seen nor spoken to her since that Christmas night. Through Vanessa, I occasionally heard updates. She had remodeled the house again, joined a new social club, taken a Mediterranean cruise. Her life carried on unchanged by my absence, which was perhaps the clearest proof that cutting ties had been the right decision. Or so I thought, until an unseasonably warm day in early December when a familiar car pulled into the farm's driveway. I was in the farm store helping a customer choose apples for a holiday pie when I saw her through the window. Diane, impeccably dressed as always, stepping out of her luxury sedan with an expression of thinly veiled disdain. Eleanor, who had been restocking shelves nearby, followed my gaze. "Do you want me to send her away?" she asked quietly. I considered it. A year ago, I might have hidden, might have sought Eleanor's protection from the emotional storm my mother always carried with her. But I was different now. "No," I said. "I can handle this." I finished with the customer, then stepped outside. I walked toward her, conscious of my uneven gait but no longer ashamed of it. My mother's eyes flicked to the cane and then away, as though the sight of my injury offended her. "Hello, Mom," I said steadily. "This is a surprise, Krista." She nodded. "You look healthy." "I am." "Thank you. What brings you here?" She glanced around. The store, the sign advertising our products, the steady flow of customers. "I was in the area," she replied. Transparent lie. The farm was nowhere near her usual circles. I waited, knowing from long experience that she never came without a purpose. "Your disability back pay came through," she said at last. "Tyler mentioned you were unreasonable about sharing it." And there it was, after a year of silence. No apology, no acknowledgement of her rejection, only money. In the past, I might have given in. I might have seen it as a chance to buy my way back into her good graces, to confuse financial support with love. But now I saw it for what it was, emotional extortion disguised as family obligation. "My disability pay is being used to support my life here and my future," I said calmly. "I won't be sharing it." Her face hardened, the mask of maternal concern dropping away. "After everything I've done for you. I raised you. I gave you a home. I supported your decision to join the military." "Did you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her version of our history. "I remember sending money home for 10 years. I remember writing and calling with barely a response. I remember coming home injured and being called a burden before being thrown out on Christmas night." "You're exaggerating," she scoffed. "You were emotional, difficult. Your injury affected your judgment." A familiar tightness rose in my chest, the old pull of guilt and doubt, but this time, clarity came with it. "Mom," I said gently, "I don't expect you to understand or acknowledge what happened. I've accepted that our relationship will never be what I hoped for, but I want you to know I'm happy here. I found peace and purpose, and I no longer need to buy your approval." She stared at me, unprepared for my calm resistance. "Your grandmother has poisoned you against me," she snapped. "No," I corrected. "Grandma simply loved me unconditionally. She showed me what real family support looks like." At that moment, Eleanor stepped out of the store. She walked toward us slowly, her face composed but resolute. "Deanne," she said, nodding, "if you've come to make amends with Krista, you're welcome to stay for tea. If you've come for any other reason, I think it's best you leave now." My mother's eyes flicked between us, calculation plain on her face. When she realized neither of us would bend, she straightened her shoulders. "I can see I'm wasting my time here," she said coldly. "When you come to your senses, Krista, you know where to find me." Without another word, she returned to her car and drove away, gravel spinning under her tires. I watched until her car disappeared down the driveway, surprised by the absence of pain. Where once there would have been devastation, there was now only quiet. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "Actually, I'm better than okay." That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset turn the winter sky pink and gold, Eleanor and I reflected on the year's journey. "You know," she said softly, "when you showed up on my doorstep last Christmas, I was terrified for you. You were so broken, not just physically, but in spirit." "I was," I admitted. "I built my entire identity around earning love that was never going to be freely given. I looked out over the farm that had become my home and purpose. Now I understand that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand beside you when standing is all you can manage. It's the people who see your value, not in what you can give them, but in who you are." Eleanor smiled, the fading light illuminating the wisdom in her face. That's a lesson many people never learn. I had made peace with that distance, knowing some relationships cannot be forced into health. As for my mother, I had neither seen nor spoken to her since that Christmas night. Through Vanessa, I heard the occasional update. She had remodeled the house again, joined a new social club, taken a Mediterranean cruise. Her life continued unchanged by my absence, which was perhaps the clearest proof that cutting ties had been the right decision. Or so I believed, until an unseasonably warm day in early December when a familiar car turned into the farm's driveway. I was in the store helping a customer choose apples for a holiday pie when I saw her through the window. Diane, immaculately dressed as always, stepping out of her luxury sedan with thinly veiled disdain. Eleanor, who had been restocking shelves nearby, followed my gaze. "Do you want me to send her away?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. A year ago, I might have hidden, might have leaned on Eleanor for protection from the storm my mother always brought, but I was different now. "No," I said. "I can handle this." I finished with the customer, then stepped outside. My gait was uneven, but I no longer felt shame. My mother's eyes flicked to the cane, then away, as though the reminder of my injury offended her. "Hello, Mom," I said evenly. "This is a surprise, Krista." She gave a curt nod. "You look healthy." "I am, thank you." "What brings you here?" She glanced around at the store. The sign advertising our products, the customers drifting in and out. "I was in the area," she said. A lie, of course. The farm was nowhere near her usual haunts. I waited, knowing she never arrived without purpose. "Your disability back pay came through," she said at last. "Tyler mentioned you were unreasonable about sharing it, and there it was." After a year of silence, no apology, no acknowledgement of the cruelty she had shown, she had come for money. Once I might have given in. I might have mistaken financial support for love, or seen this as a chance to buy my way back into her approval. But now I recognized it for what it was: emotional extortion dressed up as family obligation. "My disability pay is being used to support my life here and my future," I said calmly. "I won't be sharing it." Her face hardened, the mask of maternal concern falling away. "After everything I've done for you. I raised you. I gave you a home. I supported your decision to join the military, did you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her version of our history. I remember sending money home for 10 years. I remember writing and calling with barely a response. I remember coming home injured, only to be called a burden before being thrown out on Christmas night. "You're exaggerating," she scoffed. "You were emotional, difficult. Your injury clouded your judgment." I remember when I said it. A familiar tightness stirred in my chest, the old pull of guilt and doubt, but this time clarity steadied me. "Mom," I said gently, "I don't expect you to understand or acknowledge what happened. I've accepted our relationship will never be what I hoped for, but I want you to know I'm happy here. I've found peace and purpose, and I no longer need to buy your approval." She stared at me, clearly unprepared for this calm defiance. "Your grandmother has poisoned you against me," she accused. "No," I corrected. "Grandma simply loved me unconditionally. She showed me what real family looks like." At that moment, Eleanor stepped out of the store. She moved toward us slowly, her face resolute. "Diane," she said, nodding, "if you've come to make amends with Krista, you're welcome to stay for tea. If you've come for any other reason, I think it's best you leave now." My mother looked between us, calculation flickering in her eyes. When she realized neither of us would bend, she straightened her shoulders. "I can see I'm wasting my time here," she said coldly. "When you come to your senses, Krista, you know where to find me." Without another word, she returned to her car and drove away, gravel spraying beneath her tires. I watched until the car disappeared down the long driveway, startled not by pain, but by the absence of it. Where once there would have been devastation, there was only quiet relief. Eleanor laid a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "Actually, I'm better than okay." That evening, as the winter sky glowed pink and gold, Eleanor and I sat on the porch reflecting on the year's journey. You know, she said softly, when you showed up on my doorstep last Christmas, I was terrified for you. You were so broken, not just physically, but in spirit. I was, I admitted. I built my identity around earning love that was never freely given. I looked out at the farm that had become both home and purpose. Now I understand that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand beside you when standing is all you can manage. It's the people who see your worth, not in what you give them, but in who you are. Eleanor smiled, the fading sunlight illuminating the wisdom in her face. That's a lesson many people never learn. I had a good teacher, I told her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. As darkness settled over the farm, carrying with it the quiet promise of another day filled with purpose and peace, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just 1 year. The injury that once felt like the end of everything had instead marked the beginning of a more authentic life. The rejection that shattered my heart had freed me to find connections rooted in genuine acceptance, rather than obligation. My grandmother had shown me that love should lift you up, not wear you down. That boundaries are not selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. That starting over is not failure, but sometimes the bravest. Most importantly, she had taught me that our worth is never determined by how others treat us, but by the truth we carry within ourselves. That lesson, hard, one through both pain and healing, was the greatest gift I had ever received. As the first stars pierced the winter sky, a sense of completion settled over me. The journey wasn't over, and the healing wasn't perfect, but I had found my way home, in every sense that mattered. Have you ever wondered how different your life might be if you hadn't experienced rejection or hardship? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need the reminder that family is about connection, not just blood. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and discovery. And remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.